It's Pastor Liz from Our Savior's Lutheran Church, here with today's daily devotion. We're in the season of Easter for 50 days after Easter. This year's assigned text in the lectionary was from Matthew. Did you know that every gospel tells a slightly different story of Jesus' resurrection and what happened on that morning that the women went to the tomb? One of my favorite stories comes from Luke chapter 24. So I'm going to read it for you today. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Johanna, Mary mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. The reason I wanted to read this version of the gospel in this year is because I think it reminds us that Easter morning and the news of the resurrection can hit us all in really different ways. The women were able to hear the good news from the angels. They were able to be on the path of knowing that death was there. They were coming to anoint Jesus' body to finish the preparations for his final resting. But then they were met with this amazing news that Jesus is not dead, that he is alive, has risen as he promised. When they tell that to the male disciples, they have a lot harder time believing the women. There's lots of things we might speculate about why that is, but I think it gives us room to realize that faithful disciples can feel different things in the face of grief and in the face of fear. Jesus' resurrection, yes, changes everything because it shifts the whole world away from the certainty of death and the finality of death to recognize that God brings new life and God will bring us new life. And that gives us reason to hope. But it might not be that everything is better. It's not that God's love magically took away all pain and suffering in our present moment, or that if we were only people of great enough faith, that God would protect us and put some sort of holy shield around us and ignore those other people who don't have enough faith. No, that's not how it works. But God's raising Jesus from the dead does give us hope, gives us hope to be able to face whatever happens in our lives today, to know that this is not the final ending. Death is not the final ending, but Jesus' resurrection will be shared with all of us. And it might be that that matters to us today in a way that gives us hope. And it might be that that enters our head and our ears, but it doesn't necessarily seem to change a whole lot in our present circumstance. And I think that's okay. The disciples went through really different ways of responding to this good news, from celebration to utter disbelief, to Peter who goes home amazed, uncertain, not really sure what this resurrection actually means. For me, that's often a place that I'm at, where I am in awe of this sense of God's breaking of death and breaking of death's hold. And yet I look at the world around me on every Easter, frankly, and say, and yet there is so much suffering, and yet people still die and lose their loved ones, and yet there is addiction killing people and breaking down life. But can I still hold that amazement, that openness to wonder, that openness to hope that Jesus' resurrection provides? And so I invite you to embrace that openness to hope, to embrace the good news, whether it's hardly to be believed or whether you know it strongly in your own heart. wherever you are, to know that Jesus' resurrection is for you. And so together we can say, Alleluia, Christ is risen indeed.